Hi everyone, today I'm going to look at how swine flu attacks cells. So we've heard a lot about swine flu. This video will cover how swine flu gets into the body, gets into cells, travels to where it needs to go, replicates itself, and then proliferates across the body causing infection. So to really understand that, the first thing we need to look at is what is the structure of swine flu. So I have some pictures here, which I've taken from site scientificanimations.com with their permission. And these are 3D illustrations of the swine flu virus. Now, on the outer coating of the virus, you see this yellow colored outer coating. This is a lipid layer. And this lipid layer is actually taken from the host cell itself, which we'll see a little bit later. Inside the virus are RNA strands. So RNA strands are ribonucleic acid. They hold the genetic information for what the virus needs in order to replicate itself. And then outside this lipid layer, another couple of salient points of the structure of the virus are these two spikes, these glycoprotein spikes. And these spikes are classified in different ways, and these green spikes are H spikes, and the pink ones or purple ones are N spikes. And because of their classification, that is why swine flu is termed the H1N1 virus, because of the classification of these outer spikes. So the first step for swine flu is to get entry into the body and the cells. Entry in the body is just accomplished by any kind of shared bodily fluid. Each droplet that comes from a cough or a sneeze can carry many swine flu viruses within it. Once it enters, the swine flu virus, where these H1 proteins that we had seen on surface earlier in the structure section, these glycoproteins bind to receptors on the surface of the human cells. So basically, these H1 receptors trick the normal cell surface receptors into thinking that swine flu is actually not a foreign body. As a result of this communication, the cell not only lets the swine flu molecule enter, it also provides it with a protective membrane that allows it to freely travel within the cell. Okay? So that's actually goal number 3, is how does swine flu then travel to where it needs to go within the cell once it has entry. So with this protective outer membrane coating, swine flu then travels towards the nucleus. This is the nucleus of the cell, and that's where it needs to do whatever it needs to do for replication. So once it gets close to the nucleus, it fuses with the outer coating membrane that was provided to it by the cell surface, and causes a hole in both the membrane as well as in its own lipid layer, thereby allowing the RNA strands that we saw inside to get access to the cytoplasm or the internals of the cell. Those RNA strands then make their way into the nucleus. Okay, so that's how swine flu manages to travel from the cell surface and get its RNA strands positioned into the nucleus of the cell. The next stage for swine flu is replication. Now these RNA strands basically use the machinery that the cell already has to replicate itself. So once it goes out of the cell, it seeks out something called a ribosome. And this is a ribosome molecule. And here's the RNA molecule inside the ribosome molecule. And the ribosome molecule is like a factory within the cell. It's not a particularly smart factory. It will produce anything you give it blueprints for. And it can't tell the difference between the RNA as a foreign body and just an order from the cell's own internal machinery to produce something. So the the ribosome goes off and starts producing lots and lots of proteins, like these H1 protein spikes that are needed for the virus. So with all these little pieces of the virus now available and being produced by the cell itself, all these little protein pieces then go to the surface of the virus, and over there they assemble just below the surface, as you can see here, and the cell surface actually gives part of its own surface to create the viral envelope. We talked about this earlier, the lipid layer that was on the surface of the virus. That lipid layer is actually made up of part of the surface of the cell itself. So as these little viruses come out, because the parts of the viruses are created inside the cell by the cell's machinery itself, and then the viral coating, the envelope as it's called, is again bequeathed to it by the cell surface. Lots of these little virus molecules start coming out, and the more and more of them that come out, the more load that's put on the cell, until finally the cell bursts and millions of these molecules go out and start infecting other cells. And that's the mechanism for which swine flu uses to proliferate inside the body. And because this is such an efficient mechanism to do what swine flu sets out to do, that's the reason why swine flu is so virulent and so infectious. Okay, I hope that was helpful and it helped you get an idea of how swine flu actually works inside the body. And if you have any questions, feel free to write comments and I'll be happy to answer them as best as I can.